at the controller issue?
I looked at it a little bit,
Okay.
just sort of a kind of broad overview.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I don't know if you saw the sort of, I guess, comment question that I posted on it.
Where did you post the question? I didn't see it actually.
Let's see, it looks like it's on number 19.
Okay.
Let me post a link to that.
Okay. So what I'd like from you really is, I think that part needs to be fixed. So first, I'd like you to figure out what the right answer there is. For one, I am not a big fan of Cube Builder. I think it complicates things quite a bit by trying to be a type system for any new type that any new CRD type that we can introduce. It ends up, since Go doesn't have dynamic types, it just isn't a natural fit. And the way it's designed, we do a lot of gymnastics to just be able to do normal, very simple things. That's why, I went and wrote that controller for things to be simple. I think the controller, so I also used the controller in a different project, and I had to issue some bug fixes to get it working right. But for this project, for the other project where, we were able to get the bug fixes, there was a internal project in the company I work at. But for this project, I want it to be a community-driven effort, and I want all of us to come to consensus on what the right approach is for the controller.
Yeah, I have done some sort of investigation on my own of like Cube Builder and the operator SDK,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't I guess find them bad. I also don't know that I necessarily find them particularly useful compared to
Mm-hmm.
what they're built on top of is another Kubernetes SIG, which is
Mm-hmm.
controller runtime.
Yeah.
And we just use controller runtime directly in Rook,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that it like writing the controllers is pretty
Straightforward.
yeah, it's pretty straightforward, and I think it probably looks pretty similar to Cube Builder, since Cube Builder just uses controller runtime. I think some of those like type issues that you mentioned are kind of there, but I do find that it needs less boilerplate
Mm-hmm.
to get things working, and I think that allows for a little bit better of a high level understanding of what's going on. I especially like the I'm trying to remember what they call them. It's not primitives. It's
Yeah, I think I know what you're trying to say. Um, yeah, so abstractions.
yeah, like predicates. Like
Yeah.
you can like just the like add or the create, delete, update
Mm-hmm.
predicates are pretty easy to add, and there's not really extra boilerplate around them. And it works in Rook. I don't think we ever actually had any issues with things not quite working because of that
Mm-hmm.
library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this works too. I think there's one bug here with a race condition, but and that's easy to find and to fix. But I don't want there to be something that's kind of hiding in there that we figure out, say, 6 months from now or a year from now when things are in production. So I want to move to something that's more utilized by others. That's more common. What do you think so one, like you said, controller runtime is a great option. What do you think about using the controller framework that Kubernetes itself uses? It's not based on controller runtime or anything. It just uses client Go and builds the control on top of that, and it's pretty simple or straightforward. Uh, have you tried it out?
I guess I haven't looked really deeply into specifically what Kubernetes does
Mm-hmm.
around that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't know, I guess I've been pretty happy with
Controller runtime.
yeah, with what controller runtime gives us in Rook,
Okay.
and some of the tools it allows us to like build on. I
Okay. So
Yeah, I haven't really seen any like talks or anything from people in Kubernetes
mhm,
about like a comparison of those two things.
understood. Okay. Okay. So maybe we should sync up again separately to go over how we fix it, or should we even fix it, and we'll go from there. Um, because I think a fix might be needed, and when we do it, I think probably controller runtime is a good option. Um, and would you be able to work on that, Blaine? Would you be able to actually make the PR and the code changes for that?
Um, Potentially, I don't know that I would be able to get to it particularly quickly. There is a sort of larger work item that I have that I'm sort of just getting out of the planning phases of in Rook
Okay.
that I need to go through and do. But yeah, I've started having the discussions around like where in our sort of priority list does
Uh-huh.
Kazi integration uh,
Uh-huh.
lie, and
Yeah.
I would be the one starting on that, and then
Okay.
if that if that involves changes to Kazi, then that is no
Yeah.
different than that is part of the integration work to me.
Right. Right. Yeah, that is part of the integration. So I think you mentioned it last time too about your availability, and that's why I was thinking we could start with this one task, because this is one of those things where we don't need to address it right this second, but it's
Mhm.
important to address it sooner rather than later. So I think this would be a great fit for that.
Uh, yeah, I think that sounds good, and I think it's yeah, it should be fairly straightforward. I think it is, since
Yeah.
it is the controller. Like we yeah, in Rook we've sort of seen what it looks like to
Uh-huh.
start using the controller runtime
Right.
from already having something in place, and it uh, can be a fair bit of code change, but it's not terribly complicated, and it didn't cause us any issues on like upgrades.
Got it. Yeah,
Hey,
that's good.
hey,
We don't
Sid.
even have to worry about upgrades. Sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say I heard this whole discussion except for the first 1 minute because I was 1 minute late. What
Yeah.
is the bug that
So
you're
there's no
referring to?
bug yet. The what we're doing is um, I wrote the controller for the cozy projects, and I wrote it by hand, in the sense that I'm not using controller on time. I'm just
Yeah,
using the primitives from client Go,
yeah.
and queuing and dealing with error states and all that myself, just using an informer and uh, resource handler.
Yeah,
Uh,
you asked what Kubernetes does, and of course Kubernetes does the exact same thing because all of the code in Kubernetes pre-exists any sort of these frameworks, right?
right, right, right. Agreed. Yeah, that's where I learned how to write controllers too. The thing is, we don't need a full-fledged informer here. I'm trying to remember what were the compromises I made, and it's been a while, and I just want someone else to go over it and make sure everything looks good, because um, there is one issue in there is a small race condition in the implementation that I've already fixed. Um, but I want others to also go through this, so it improves the confidence in that code. Um, Maybe you could take a look at it as well, Ben.
I'm interested in doing that. That
I
would be a
know.
time-consuming effort.
I know.
So it will
I knew
not
you
be
were going to
soon.
say that. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Anyone here, you're welcome to take a look. It helps to make the project a little more robust, and that's what we want. Um, all right. So we have. Oh, Shane, can you make me the host? She's in another meeting. because I
Oh,
want
she's
to share
double
something.
booked.
Sorry?
She's double booked.
Yeah.
Jeff has co-host.
No.
Her Zoom chat says she's going to make you co-host when you
But she
join.
made you co-host, Jeff.
Oh, she made me. Okay, so can I assign it to you, Sid? Hold
Sure.
on. I don't know how to do that though. So
Just make him, or I think you can have multiple co-hosts.
yeah, let
Yeah.
me just click your
Click-
name.
Yeah,
You-
click on participants. Yeah.
It doesn't say I can make you host. More. Chat allow, record, rename. Okay. Oh, all right, I'll try to do it. What are you trying to do? Share your screen, Sid?
Yeah. It's a simple slide. I mean, yeah, if you can share this, I'm going to share it on the Zoom chat.
I'll try. Usually
Luckily,
I just click a name and under options, or more, there's a thing to make you a host.
can you
But
do that?
I don't have that option on my Zoom. I wonder if
Maybe only hosts can do it and not co-hosts.
Possibly.
I
Jeff,
don't.
can you just open that link?
Yes. Yeah, I've got it open. So let me just share my screen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that one slide for today, really.
I guess I have to share the whole desktop.
Yeah, whatever works.
Okay. Here it is.
Yeah, you click on present if you can. There's the present button at the top, right hand side. Yeah.
Can you see this screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so just tell me.
Yeah, present it. So there's just a lot of things going on. So
Just tell me when you want to change slides, Sid, or which slide.
I don't want to change slides. I just have one slide really. So that's why I chose this slide.
Okay.
So Jeff, yeah. So here's what I want to talk about. Last week we brought up this issue of ownership and bucket mutation. The question was, how do we handle mutation of a bucket after it's been provisioned? So say, for instance, there's a bucket which is the data source for a website, and we keep the bucket private until the information that's required to complete or launch the website is present, and then we make the bucket public. In such a case, we are changing a property of the bucket after it's been provisioned. So in this case, a few questions came up. One is, how do we do it? Because before last week, we hadn't really thought of a way to handle bucket mutations. Now, that's one question. The second question is, who does it? Is it the admin who does it, or is it the user who provisions the bucket, who creates a bucket using the bucket request? Is that the user that gets to do it? So we came up with a solution last week that seemed to check off all the different concerns we had for making this or for adding this feature, enabling this feature. So we considered two alternatives.
Well, Sid, before you get into the details,
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to caveat that we had a good proposal for the mechanism. Whether like public-private is one of the things which should be mutatable by this mechanism is a separate question, and that was the example you happened to use.
Yeah.
So I'm still not convinced that like you should be able to set public-private on an existing bucket through this mechanism, but if there is something that you should be able to set, then the mechanism we talked about is the right one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry
Okay.
to interrupt.
So, no
because
worries.
you picked that one.
Yeah. Oh, we can take any number of examples. Turning on object versioning. Just anything really. Turning on access logging. So So Ben, remind me here. We considered two alternatives. The first one was the admin goes and changes the bucket object directly, and that would trigger the sidecar controller to call the driver, which would go and make the change in the cloud backend. And there was a problem with this approach. One of them was if you're sharing a bucket across namespaces, in that case, what we do is we create another copy of the bucket, and that copy of the bucket will not have this change show up. So if we were to make this change, if we were to change, say, object versioning or access logging or any other parameter, then only one of those buckets would see that change. The bucket on which the admin goes and changes that value is the only one.
No, this wasn't the problem. Any scheme where we rely on like a change on the Kubernetes side, but we keep our one-to-one binding scheme so that there's multiple copies of the bucket. We'll run into issues where you don't have a source of truth. So the only alternative that we seriously considered was going back on our one-to-one binding proposal and asking if maybe we need to do many-to-one binding again. And we decided that for all the reasons we decided not to do that in the first time, this is not a good enough reason to change that decision.
Right.
But it doesn't matter whether an end user does it or an admin does it. I mean, at the end of the day, something needs to update a Kubernetes object, and in the world where there are many of them,
Pointing to the same resource in the backend.
yeah, pointing to the same resource. The only, well, I guess the only other alternative was not representing it all in the Kubernetes object and saying this must be done out of band. That was the other proposal, was we could say Kubernetes is just going to get out of your way.
Yeah.
And you have to do it.
Yeah, and we don't have any of the fields in the spec anymore in that case. We just don't have those fields in the object anymore. And instead, we get the source of truth becomes the driver, which gets information from the backend. And those fields are filled in the status fields.
And you can set stuff in like the parameters, but that's opaque. And so it was only acted on at creation time. That was the whole thing. And because there's no mechanism to like change parameters on an existing bucket, like that scheme wasn't going to work. So do you want to describe what we proposed, or do you want me to describe it?
It was basically just what we said. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so the idea is we could have it much like we have a deletion policy on objects that tells you, when this Kubernetes object gets deleted, should I delete the actual object or not? We can have a similar one for updates called like an update policy that says, if the Kubernetes object, if some parameter changes, should I update the object or not? And then you could, in the controller that was watching for these things, only react to changes on objects that had the policy set to true. And furthermore, in the case of conflicts where multiple objects were saying, that they should update and they don't agree, you could just fail and say, look, you should only have one thing that has the update policy set to true.
Right.
Otherwise, we don't know what to do because you have conflicting sources of truth.
Wait, so if the fields are not going to be in the bucket, why even have an update policy? Didn't we say that?
Yeah, so there's a separate decision that needs to be made for any given feature before we get to this stage, which is, does Kubernetes need to know about it explicitly at all? Like, for the ones that Kubernetes needs to know about, and I think the one that we were talking about was object level locking, as an example of one. Like, Kubernetes would need to know about it if it was going to be reflected into the downward facing API because pods needed to know about it, right? Like presumably object level locking is the kind of thing that like you depend on, and if it's not there, bad things are going to happen. So like you'd rather the whole thing fails before their pod starts up if object level locking isn't available or something, or maybe that's a bad example. Maybe the pod needs to change its behavior if it doesn't have access to object level locking. It needs to be able to query that when it starts up so that it can do something different.
Mm-hmm.
The point is for certain types of features, if multiple implementers of the same protocol want to support a common feature and we want interoperability, we would want to promote it to a Kubernetes level feature. We'd want to put it in the spec. We'd want to specify what the contract for that feature really meant so that everyone who did it exactly the same way or to some minimum standard. And then at that point, it needs to be reflected up into the Kubernetes API so that controllers can introspect whether that feature is present or not. I mean, for the vast majority of things, you do it opaquely through parameters because there is no interoperability implied between implementations. But for the ones where we want interoperability and it matters to workloads, then we would go through this process of making it a formal object, and Kubernetes could mutate it for you as well. Now, I don't know how Kubernetes is going to mutate the things that we don't decide meet this bar of belonging in the Kubernetes API, because that's a separate question. Huh?
No, we said Kubernetes won't do it. We would have to put out a ban.
That's one stance we can take. Yes, is that if it's opaque to Kubernetes, you have to update it out of band using some proprietary mechanism.
Right. Right. That's what we said. So coming back to this, I feel like we're missing something. Yeah. So for those fields that Kubernetes is going to manage, what will it look like? What will it look like? Say, object level locking is enabled. How's that going to work?
So the idea would be that you would change the bucket object to set object level locking from false to true. The controller would see that change. It would check if the update policy was set to true and that no other object also had an update policy set to true and a different value of that field. And assuming that everyone agreed that yes, object level locking should be turned on for this particular bucket, it would just go do it. And then it would update the status to reflect that. And so any one of these particular fields would need to be reflected in both the spec and the status for the bucket so that you would know what it's supposed to be and what it actually is, and you can reconcile the two, right? Because there will always be moments of time when like you've asked for it to be turned on, but it's not turned on yet. And you need to know which state you're in. That's what the status would be for. But I imagine that this particular mechanism would be used sparingly and for features that would need to be, part of the Kubernetes API contract with its pods. And things like public-private access don't seem to fit that mold for me because pod doesn't care who else can access it as long as he can access it. Oh, did we lose Sid? I think Sid dropped.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, yes, you dropped.
Yeah, something happened.
Okay.
Okay, so what did we just talk about? I was asking how would that mechanism work?
Yeah, I was just asserting that for something like public-private, like this mechanism would be used for things that where the contract between Kubernetes and the pod required knowing this particular attribute, and then I was making the argument that the public-private doesn't fit that minimum bar as far as I'm concerned because pods don't care who else can access a particular bucket as long as they can.
True.
So the public-privateness of a bucket doesn't seem relevant inside Kubernetes. It's just an operational concern for the guy who owns the bucket. as long as the individual pods that Kubernetes is vending the bucket to can do what they need to do, that's the end of Kubernetes responsibility.
That's fine. What about those fields that do matter to Kubernetes? How would that mechanism work?
Oh, did you drop that early? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you would need to have a spec and a status field on the bucket object, and the controller would have to, look at the value of the spec field, and also look at the value of the update policy field, and if it could reliably determine what the value should be, and then it would be responsible for changing it and then reflecting that back into the status. And the value of the status field is to cover, that brief period of time between when you asked for the feature to be turned on and when it's actually turned on, so that you can, know when it's been responded to.
So if a pod is already using that bucket, that needs to know that something has changed, right?
Potentially. I mean, yeah, on a per
Yeah,
feature
I mean, that's the
basis,
whole point of having those features in the
on a per feature basis, we would have to determine like whether it was switchable, while something was attached or not. And we'd have to go through, and figure out all those things, whether, mutations were valid, and whether, whether existing pods should see the old behavior or see the new behavior, whether they should be notified when the behavior
but
switches.
Is that even possible? Is that
in
even
general,
possible
no.
to go
In general, no. But like, so something like object level locking, if you had a pod running and then you flipped it on, maybe new pods could find out about it, and the old pod would just continue under the old behavior, not know. So, I mean, I don't know. We would. This is the kind of thing we have to think through on a per feature basis and say, what are the implications of just turning it on while someone's using the bucket? Because we can't tell them that we've turned it on after the pod has started. So is that going to cause problems? We'll have to think through all that stuff.
I mean, it is technically possible to go replace the mount from underneath, or replace the file from underneath.
Right, but then we have to write into the API contract that says, for this feature, it may change at runtime, and here's how you find out that it has changed at runtime. And then you're putting a big responsibility on every workload that consumes that feature. So
absolutely, yes. That's not a good idea. I agree.
So yeah, I think we take it on a case-by-case basis and say, like, is it valuable enough to go through that rigmarole, or is this just something that we don't deal with?
Fair enough. Okay. So Jeff, we got a chance to discuss this entire thing last week after the community meeting. Did this clear up some of the questions you had?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it clears up. I missed the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes of the last meeting. So yes, it does. I see some issues or just some things that don't smell right to me, but
yeah, please.
I understand what is being proposed better.
Okay. What are the issues you're seeing?
Well, the one is the question you brought up. I mean, I have several, but one is the question you brought up at the end, Sid, where if the criteria for a mutable attribute of a bucket is that it matters to the workload, which is what I think Ben suggested, and it's reasonable. Then Sid, your follow-up question is really important, and that was, how do we notify the workload? In other words, Kubernetes, I think, in storage today has the concept that the workload gets a snapshot of storage information. It's static, and the workload isn't, to my knowledge, isn't made aware of any changes, and there aren't that many changes that can be done anyway. And now with buckets, we're talking about a much more sophisticated and complicated system where if we're going to allow an attribute to mutate, it seems reasonable that the workload ought to know about it. If the definition of a mutable attribute is that it matters to workloads. So I don't know how to resolve that, but that's one red flag for me.
So on the volume side, like, you're right. we almost never do this because the vast majority of things that the workload could care about are defined at the beginning, and then we just don't let you change them. I believe the one exception is the volume size. You can resize a volume, and we do specify that, like, we will go back in and update the volume size on
I
your
think
running
config
pod.
maps also.
Okay, but that's not a
What's it?
CSI thing. That's more of that's a core Kubernetes thing. But yeah, like there is a vast amount of controller just to handle resize, because it was important enough to do all this extra work, and so we did the work, and it's literally, like, I would say half the code in CSI. Well, I don't know. I could be exaggerating because I've spent too much time in the resize code paths, but like half the code feels like it's dedicated to resize because of all of the extra things you need to do when the size of a volume attached to a running pod is changed. But of course, resizing a pod or a volume is a really important workflow, so we decided it was worth all this effort. I don't know what on the object storage side might rise to that level where, like, you want to be able to do it on while the workload is still running, and then you want to tell the workload that it's changed while it's still running, because my base assumption is that restarting the workload is trivially easy, right? Like, just update your bucket and bounce all your workloads and away you go. And like, nobody should blink at that in most cases. Every now and then someone says, I have a good reason why I can't just restart my workload. And I really need to keep it running. And I also need to find out that, like, this attribute has changed while I'm running. I'm willing to listen to those kinds of use cases, but I'm willing to bet that they're less frequent than you think.
No, I'm willing to bet the other way. I
Okay.
don't think people would be okay with just restarting their workload.
But I mean, but that's the whole model of Kubernetes, right? Is nodes come
That's the
and
whole model of
go.
Kubernetes, yes, but people are just getting to this model now. People are still adopting microservices in the
I
enterprise
know.
space.
There's a lot of people that are thinking in old ways. Maybe I'll say that, and don't adopt the new paradigms quickly. But they should, and we should make sure that, like, that's the preferred way to do things. I don't want to throw everyone else, to the curb. I want to try to help, but I mean, my base assumption is, if restarting a pod is a big deal for you, you probably designed something wrong.
So can you repeat that?
My base assumption is always that if restarting a pod is a big deal for you, it's because you designed something wrong.
Agreed. Definitely
So,
agreed. Yeah.
And I know a lot of people do. So we have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yes. Okay, so it's good that we know the trade-offs. For the API reviewer, what we'll do is, in the KEP, we'll update to have this text be in there, this new approach, and then we'll put it in as of our latest discussion. This is how we're thinking of it, and just to give the confidence that we have a possible solution to move forward with this question of bucket mutation, and we'll see how it goes.
Sid, I just the other thing that I don't like about it is to say our cozy solution to mutating bucket properties is to use proprietary back-end hooks, S3 command, etc. That's not a solution. That says we don't have one. We give up and you do it outside of Kubernetes.
Well, no. This is so for features that are understand to cozy, we would handle them. But like we've already said, that there's a huge number of opaque things that cozy doesn't understand. It just passes you a string map that says, here you go. Like,
yeah. So I mean, that's reasonable, Ben. And I think Sid brought this up, or someone did. I mean, cozy defines certain bucket properties in a bucket class and a parameters map. And but then we say the way you change it is to go in the back end and change it directly.
Well, are you talking about the opaque ones or the first class ones?
Hmm.
Well,
Both.
If like
Both.
for the first class ones, I think we outlined what the answer is. For the opaque ones, Sid is saying we don't touch it. I'm open to a proposal that says we do, but
Mhm.
like that's going to involve copying the parameters from every bucket class to every bucket.
yeah,
That
that's my third thing. So I had a few. The third thing is that I think when you start talking about actually cozy supporting mutation of bucket properties, which is a much bigger than I originally thought it would be, bigger issue or more complex. In me at least, in my head, I start revisiting the one-to-one mapping, which I know you're a proponent of, Ben. But when you start making a change to a bucket instance, the B, and then you need to decide, and then you need to somehow propagate that change to other Bs that point to the same back-end bucket. In my mind, that reveals a architectural flaw.
yeah, okay, I see what you're getting at, and that's exactly what we went over last Thursday because
Mhm.
it does feel very weird, and the obvious solution is to revisit the one-to-one mapping.
Yes, I
Uh,
was doing that a little over the weekend, but I think that is a conclusion. When you start thinking about mutating and changing a B, you naturally fall into revisiting that one-to-one mapping decision.
Yeah. The problem is if you revisit that, you open up a whole bunch of cans of worms.
We have to make namespace bucket across. We have to make sharing across namespaces work. I mean, that.
So let me try to sharpen up the proposal and describe what actually would happen under this proposal. So let's say we had some first class parameter, like let's say object level locking again, because that's fairly easy to understand what it means. Let's say that's reflected all the way from the storage class through cozy as a first class option on your bucket, and it also shows up in the downward facing API, the pods see. So if you have multiple buckets, or if you've created a bucket and then you've cloned it a bunch of times to share it across your namespaces, you'll have a bunch of BRs and a bunch of Bs, all one-to-one bound with each other, all with basically the same values. Presumably only one of them will have a deletion policy of delete and the other ones will not, because you don't want everyone to have the ability to delete this thing. Um,
Yeah.
but you could decide otherwise. Similarly, the update policy would be the same. You'd have to say, okay, look, I don't want everyone to just be able to go twiddle the switch, right? If 4 different namespaces have BRs that refer to the same bucket, and they all start flipping the switch to enable object level locking on, object level locking off, you're going to have problems, right? You have like that's a RBAC problem. Like, who is allowed to make the change? So what the update policy does is it tells you which one is basically the master copy, like which bucket gets to make changes and which ones are mere shadows or reflections of the original bucket and they don't get to make changes because they're just using it. The update policy gives you that. So it's a combination of RBAC control, who can make the changes, and also disambiguating, potentially conflicting sources of truth, so that you have a way to determine what the user really wanted. I mean, nothing stops someone, unfortunately, from setting the update policy to true on multiple of the buckets. But what you can do in that situation is at least go through all of the ones that do have it true, compare all the values, and if they're all the same, do it. And if they're not, generate an error and say, hey, I don't know what to do now. You need to either update all of your buckets or take away someone's update policy so that it becomes clear what I'm supposed to do. But like
Mission controller. I don't even see that as a problem.
that's not an admission controller, because remember we had a long discussion about how admission controllers can't deal with multiple objects at the same time if they're distributed
That's true.
across nodes, and you have there's a bunch of issues with trying to do this on the admission controller side. So what we proposed was let the change go through and hit the etcd, and then react to it on the mutation controller when it sees the object update come through, and it can say, hey, I don't know what to do, I'm not doing anything, and just log a warning, generate an event or something. But the other thing I was going to say is, for these first class fields, they would have a spec and they would have a status, and the status for all of them could be updated to the correct value in time, right? If you had 4 copies of it, only one guy is allowed to make the change. He makes the change. Everyone's status is going to get updated to show the correct value. And so you'll have this weirdness where the spec on some of the copies won't match the status, but their update policies will also be false, meaning that they weren't allowed to change it anyways, and their changes are being ignored. So it feels like it's a fairly workable solution that doesn't have any race conditions and doesn't suffer from the bajillion problems that will happen if we revisit one-to-one binding. So I get that it's not perfect and it has some gross aspects to it, but I believe it is the least gross of all the alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, I think effort to look at re-examine one to N binding is a big distraction and potentially doesn't have a good answer. So being able to keep that, all the code assumes that right now, and all the documentation is saying that. So being able to stay with that is pretty helpful, I think, at this time.
Yeah, and all of this awkwardness and challenge comes out of the fact that Kubernetes doesn't have a way to basically atomically update multiple objects. That's at the core of all of this. So as long as we don't have atomic multi-object updates, it's better just to have one-to-one binding and to make these copies and then to deal with the ugliness that evolves from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So Jeff, you are working on the CAP. Could you let him know that this is what we're thinking about on the CAP itself?
You want me to do another add to the existing PR?
No, just a comment.
Oh, comment
Yeah.
in that PR.
Yeah, because this is what he's been asking about, right?
The one that Tim's reviewing. Whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and he asked a question over the weekend, which I was going to get to, and then I didn't. So I would like to address that as well.
Mhm.
Plus, I don't think anyone's addressed his long, multi-paragraph question or comments and in the CAP.
He's thinking about namespacing buckets, right?
Yeah, and various other points that it's his first time reviewing the KEP, and all he's doing is reviewing a PR, which is a big subset of the KEP. And so he doesn't have a mechanism to make other comments that aren't related to the PR. So he did that in the conversation tab.
Yeah. Yeah. I think as we go forward and we let him know how we're thinking about this, I think his thought process coming from trying to solve the same bucket mutation issue, and he's looking at the problem a different way. I think we should just let him know what we're thinking and then evolve from there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we need some calling out mutation at all, specifically in the KEP. We don't do that today.
Okay.
But I wanted to revisit the concern about the fields that are opaque and whether or not Cozy should be able to mutate those fields, because that seems like a very interesting question from my perspective. Especially because, Jeff, you seem to feel strongly that Cozy should be able to mutate things even if they're opaque to Cozy.
What did you say? I had a strong feeling?
You seem to have a strong opinion that they should, and so
I don't think it's strong. I think you're right. It will make it's an interesting thing to think about.
Okay. Because yeah, I'm not opposed to the idea, but it's hard to understand why we would expend a bunch of effort for something that is effectively like a proprietary opaque thing.
I guess philosophically, I would like Cozy to be a powerful framework around buckets, and I would like an administrator or storage bucket manager, object store manager to be able to make their changes to the underlying bucket through Cozy. And that would include first class field changes as well as protocol specific changes. So that's kind of the grandiose view I have of it.
Right, but like, I think you could make the same case like with volumes, existing storage,
You could.
and we don't,
We
because
don't.
it's
I mean, you
hard.
could. It's a good argument, Ben. Exactly what I just said should apply to volumes, and Kubernetes doesn't do that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
All right. What's the reason we don't do it in volumes?
It's hard.
I mean, yeah. If you think about just the number of vendors and their weird proprietary options, and the fact that we just pack them into a string map in the storage class, and
Yep.
so, that's it. Like, if you had to not only specify there's a creation time that allow mutation of them,
Mm-hmm.
you can scarcely imagine the types of corner cases that are going to pop out of the woodwork when people are like, oh, but like I need to notify the pod when this option changes, but it's opaque to Kubernetes. So the mechanism by which I notify the pod also has to be opaque and proprietary. And like, your head would quickly explode. And so I think we just said, you know what, like until someone has a good use case, we're not going to do this.
Yeah. And people work around it just fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, the workaround is if you want to mutate one of those opaque things, you go to the storage controller and you do it outside of CSI, and no one seems too bent out of shape about that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad we got to discuss this and get some more clarity on this issue. I want to do this again on Thursday for the others who haven't had a chance to go through this. And formalize this and kind of come to agreement that this is the right approach. I think we're almost there. I just want some more people to go over this, just so that we can have some more people kind of try and poke holes into this. Yeah, that's it from me. Does anyone have any other questions?
So how are you? Sorry, I just joined for part 10 minutes. So how are you doing with the API review? You need to address the team's comment.
Yeah. So Tim is going. So Tim is getting into this from scratch. He's just learning about this, and he has a lot of questions. Now I'm wondering if we can ask him to move forward with the KEP, and then address his comments as the next step. So I've asked him to, a video call anytime possible, as soon as possible. But he hasn't responded yet. So as of right now, though, he has some comments on the pull request, and many of them are even just like ideas. Jeff, can you share your screen and I mean open a tab with the enhancements pull request, the KEP?
Yeah, I got the PR somewhere.
Yeah, but
this is just the KEP. What was the PR?
I think you can just scroll up and click on pull request and just find it.
Oops. This is in Yard Turkey though.
You want to go back to the Yard Turkey and click on.
It's
yeah.
There's no.
I know. Click on the link above. Just that one.
Hey, Shane, can you give Sid post so he can share his screen? It will be faster.
I can already share screen.
No, I can't.
I thought I made you a co-host. Oh, did I make Jeff a co-host?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me.
Yeah, I can present now. Can you see my screen?
I see your
It's all white.
So white. Okay, one second. Let me close that. How about share Chrome? What? It doesn't let me share the whole screen anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't see the option for.
Oh, we can see it.
Okay, you can see Chrome,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you should be able to share desktop. That should be controlled by you, not me.
I didn't see the option, so that's what I was asking.
Weird.
No, not this. No, pull request here. Yeah, it's 2349. Okay. So here's what he's asked. Let's see. Yeah, these are basic questions. There's one really long comment. Overall lack of self-service beyond day zero. And when he says this, he's talking about bucket mutation. And yeah, self-service is not possible with even the current approach that we're talking about, because we are asking the admin to either go change the bucket directly, or we are asking the admin to go do it out of band.
No. If it needs to be if it needs to be done out of band, it just depends who has access to do it. It could be the end user, it could be the admin. But if we do it in band, there's no reason you can't just change the BR and have the change propagate through the B to the back end. You just need another controller to also reflect changes from BRs to Bs. Again, following the update policy.
That might work.
Bit. But which is exactly how deletion works, right? Like you delete the BR, we consult the deletion policy, and then depending on what it says, we either delete it or we don't.
Yeah.
So it's self-service deletion.
Yeah. So Shing, I'm I'm going to try and tell Tim to move forward with this, because with this current approach, we're not really closing out a possible solution for the questions he's raised. And it'll be good to go through the API process right away. So that's the current plan.
What do you mean go to the API process right away?
API review process. So the KEP merges tomorrow. So I want to understand this. Is the merging the KEP is different, or is it the same as starting the API review process?
This is part of the API review. Well, of course, there was still code review, right? When you have the code that, well, you already have code.
What do you mean
People
by
be reviewing that as well?
So the KEP review deadline for tomorrow.
which review? Because the KEP's been merged. Is this
I know, but that was provisional, right? This is like doing alpha, so that's why, because Tim didn't review this before, remember? Right? This is the first time, so that's why he will have a lot of questions. This is a very big KEP.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. He'll have a lot of questions, and when he asked us what level of scrutiny we wanted just advisory, or we wanted it to be K8's kind of a core level. We said you pick the
what
core.
do you core level? I mean, this is auto tree, right? What does he mean core level?
Core level means, will this eventually end up in Kubernetes upstream? Will it have a .k8s.io API?
Oh, you mean the group, API group?
Yeah.
Where did the tomorrow deadline come from?
February 9th is the KEP merge deadline.
Yeah.
That's the regular feature proposal freeze.
Oh, I see.
For 121, like there's another one in 3 months.
There's another one in 3 months. Yes. It's just the only reason we won't be able to reach alpha in 3 months will be because this KEP isn't merged, because we'll have the rest of the things in place. That's why we want to see if we can push it this week itself, or this time itself.
There's some other sections missing for being at an alpha level, right?
you need to have that production readiness, right? So, but
Mhm.
I think with such a big change, probably the person who is doing production readiness probably want to get the team's approval first before
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, I think given as it is right now, I think, trying to push everything through before tomorrow is probably unrealistic because we can deploy things, but we're not production ready. Even if we were to fill out a checklist, we're really not.
No, not production ready, but the alpha, when you reach alpha is actually not really production ready, right?
Mhm.
I mean, but there's
Yeah.
but the alpha, they do have a few things that you need to fill out. Maybe, did you add that section? I don't
Yeah, we
see-
did.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you should also start pinging someone at the production readiness channel. So get
Mhm.
someone on board because that
Mhm.
it will take this person some time to go through this as well, right? So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
tomorrow
So
will be the last day. So probably today should just start ping
yeah,
someone.
we'll start it. So do you think, Shing, do you still think it's possible to get this kept merged by tomorrow? I mean, let's assume that Tim responds and green lights this.
I think it's still possible. You just need to pin him, but yeah, it is pretty big. I think the problem is that this is the first time he's reading this, right? So this is a
Right.
really huge one, and he definitely will have a lot of questions. So
Got it.
I
Okay.
think it comes down to whether Tim says yes or no, and based on the size of it, the likelihood of him saying yes feels low.
Same.
but
Yeah.
but you
That's
don't know.
Yeah,
yeah. We don't know.
it's unlikely. It's
Yeah.
possible.
yeah, I probably want to see if he
Yeah.
wants to have another meeting with you just to sort out all of this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, maybe he still need more time to
Right.
understand.
And I'll say this: I tried to get on Tim's calendar, and he said that he's booked. So
Yeah.
there's
No, I know.
I don't think another meeting is
there's
likely.
only like there's only like more than one day for him, right? So he is on a lot of caps. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's understandable. It's fine. It's more. We'll wait for him and we'll do it the right way. That's what's more important. And we should make sure that the API reviewers also feel like this is ready to move forward, and we shouldn't just push for it. So it's fine. 3 months is okay. We'll just by 3 months we can be more than ready. We can have that thing merged and also make more progress.
Yeah,
So
just ping him early, right? If you
yeah.
wait until last week, I mean, he's already booked, and
Yeah,
so
yeah, that is right. So we'll. I mean, with this PR itself, we're already pinging him early for the next time.
yeah.
So yeah, this is not too bad. We'll continue doing what we're doing, and try to get the kept merged. We'll still try for tomorrow. It's unlikely, but it's worth a shot.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. That's it for now. Let's meet again Thursday, and we'll go over the same decision one more time. Give you all enough time to just think about it a little bit more. See if you can poke more holes into it, and then we'll decide finally on Thursday.
So I have a real quick question. Is this meeting supposed to take an hour every week? Because it
No,
was
no,
only
it's
on my
not.
calendar for a half hour.
It's only for half an hour. We can update it to be 1 hour.
We seem to consistently go past the half hour, and so I want to
Mhm.
block out my calendar if I need to be here for the whole hour
Yeah, that's
on
true.
Mondays.
We do. How do I open up calendar? Somewhere here.
Okay, yeah, that was all. I got to run to my next meeting.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.